This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
Thanks for supporting Art of Darkness. You have to understand, like, conceptually, they're all above it. They're all trying to be above it. They're trying to live that free love. They're trying to be ethically non-monogamous,
right,
to parlance of our times, right? But they don't have that language, and so,
somebody should have taught them about polycules.
There you go.
All
We're
these
definitely
problems
dealing with some sort of
all these problems would have been resolved.
You just put it in writing, and then that makes it easy.
Nobody's feeling,
then everybody can agree. So just write a contract. Shelley greatly offended Godwin at one point when, during a walk in the French countryside, he suggested that they both take the plunge into a stream naked. This offended her principles. She was partly consoled by the visits of Hogg, whom she disliked at first, but soon considered a close friend. Percy Shelley seemed to have wanted Mary Godwin and Hogg to become lovers. Mary did not dismiss the idea, since in principle she believed in free love. In practice, however, she loved only Percy Shelley and seemed to have ventured no further than flirting with Hogg. I got friend-zoned Hogg by the free love people. Boy, oh boy. On the 22nd of February, 1815, she gave birth to a 2-month premature baby girl who was not expected to survive. On the 6th of March, she wrote to Hogg, "My dearest Hogg, my baby is dead. Will you come to see me as soon as you can? I wish to see you. It was perfectly well when I went to bed. I woke in the night to give it suck, but it appeared to be sleeping so quietly that I would not awake it. It was dead then, but we did not find out till morning. From its appearance, it evidently died of convulsions. Will you come? You are so calm a creature, and Shelley is afraid of a fever from the milk, for I am no longer a mother now."
Ooh.
So young. The loss of her child induced acute depression in Mary Godwin, who was haunted by visions of the baby, but she conceived again and had recovered by the summer. With a revival in Percy Shelley's finances after the death of his grandfather, Sir Bechet Shelley, the couple holidayed in Torquay and then rented a 2-story cottage in Bishopsgate on the edge of Windsor Great Park. Must be nice. Yeah. Little is known about this period in Mary Godwin's life. My grandparents all dead. Everybody's dead. I got a hot dish. I got a little money from my maternal grandfather. He had 11 kids.
Right. Yeah.
I've got hundreds of cousins. I'm wealthy in family who I never see or hear from. Right. The Hibernian menace. As they say on certain corners of Twitter. But yeah, it's just like And again, how many people? Yeah, I mean, how many people? This is just a thing that happens, man. There are people who have wealth, people who don't have wealth, people who have family wealth, people who don't. It's like, oh, grandpa's dead. Oh, let's go rent a house.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
Grieve briefly.
What are you going to not spend the money? Like,
yeah, what are you going to do? You're going to donate it to progressive and radical causes to back up the bullshit that you write about? No. rented a house. I do think actually at some point Shelley went and was like, he was invested in Catholic, the One True Faith, the Catholic liberation in Ireland. And, he put his money where his mouth was a little bit. But yeah, as a general rule, like, okay. Windfall. Grandpa's dead. Hallelujah. Little is known about this period in Mary Godwin's life, for her journal from May of 1815 to July of 1816 is lost. At Bishopsgate, Percy wrote his poem Alaster, or The Spirit of Solitude. And on the 24th of January, 1816, Mary gave birth to a second child, William, named after her father, and soon nicknamed Wilmouse. In her novel, The Last Man, she later imagined Windsor as a Garden of Eden. Okay, so we're coming up to the Frankenstein period, which we've already sort of covered, but we're going to go into depth. We have to meet Byron because he's going to be a character. I knew a guy like in and around college who had long hair, and he called himself Byron. Like that was the name he gave himself. Yeah, he was really into it. I'm like, okay, all right, yeah. Man. Actually, now that I think about it, I think he might have got somebody pregnant in the house that we rented down by the. I think he was living the story in his own. Yeah. I don't really know. This is a long time ago. So this is describing Claire. Vivacious, good-looking, and with, as she remembered, a bright color. Claire was now almost 18. Mary had found love with a poet who, much though Mary and Claire admired him, was far from being a household name. Shelley, in the spring of 1816, was better known for the scandals he had caused than for the privately printed Queen Mab and the as-yet unpublished Alaster. Byron, famous enough already to think of himself as literature's Napoleon, was in London and alone. After a stormy estrangement from Annabella Milbank, his wife of a year, he was rumored to be living in unconventional intimacy with his married half-sister, Augusta Lee. Each time Claire walked along Piccadilly, she saw people waiting outside the curtained window of 13 Piccadilly Terrace for a glimpse of Byron. Scandal only added to the fascination. Byron also happened to have an influential position on the committee of London's principal theatre, Drury Lane. Claire, who had already tried her hand at writing a play, decided to approach him. Hey, a playwright, one of us. If he could help her to become an actress or a playwright, well and good. If he could be persuaded to take a more personal interest in her, so much the better. Yeah. Later on in life, Claire liked to remember that she had been a timid girl. There was nothing shy about her assault on Byron. Reminiscing in old age to her attentive American visitor, Edward Augustus Silsby, she claimed that her landlady's sister had given them a very proper and formal introduction. The letters tell a different story. Using assumed names and giving herself a hint of the noblewoman by stamping the letters with a pretty seal both Mary and she had been given by Shelley, Claire laid siege until she gained her wish, permission to visit Byron alone at his house sometime late in March.
And boy.
Okay.
And you're going to visit the famous poet alone at his villa.
Yeah. You get the idea. So right. She set her sights, and who knows if there was maybe a little bit of a jealousy thing, like you've got a poet, I'm going to get the bigger poet.
Right.
You're dating Ringo, I'm going to date George.
Right. Right. I like it.
Yeah. Let's see here. So in May of 1816, Mary, Percy, and their son traveled to Geneva with Claremont. They planned to spend the summer with the poet Lord Byron, whose recent affair with Claire had left her pregnant. In History of a 6 Weeks tour through a part of France, Switzerland, Germany, and Holland, she describes the particularly desolate landscape in crossing from France to Switzerland. The party arrived in Geneva the 14th of May, 1816, where Mary called herself Mrs. Shelley. They're not married.
Right.
Byron joined them on the 25th of May with his young physician, John William Polidori, and rented the Via Diodati close to Lake Geneva at the village of Coligny. And it looks like it's still there. It's a mansion in the village of Coligny near Lake Geneva. Wonderful. Cool. I wonder if it's been privately owned. You can look it up. Okay.
Villa Diodati. That's Diodati is the name of John Milton's only good friend.
I wonder if it's related at all. Percy rented a smaller building called Maison Chapuis on the waterfront nearby. They spent their time riding, boating on the lake, and talking late into the night. And this is where we're going to get into Frankenstein. And I have, is it this book that I want to read from or the other one? I think it's the other one. We gotta get into it because that's the money maker.
Oh yeah.
Is it really page 153 that I want to read from? You know how difficult it can be to keep these episodes organized when you construct them, Brad? You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Here we go.
There's a method to the madness that it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you type if in those notes you put the wrong page number, it's a problem.
It's a serious problem. I always keep a bunch of these things, little sheets of paper inside. Yeah. Anyway. Few periods in Mary's life have been so eagerly discussed as the summer during which Frankenstein was conceived. Unfortunately for us, her daily record of life at Geneva occupied the last pages of the lost journal of 1815 to 1816. She must have drawn on these entries for the vivid account which she wrote in 1828 as her contribution to Thomas More's The Life of Lord Byron with his letters and journals. Tactfully presented by Moore as having been Shelley's wife in 1816, Mary's identity as his source of information was concealed. She was quoted extensively, but only as a person who had been among Byron's circle. Writing out her recollections for Moore, Mary shifted and compressed events for dramatic effect in the confident belief that nobody would contradict her version. Claire, for reasons which will become apparent, was by 1828 only concerned with being excised from Byron's history. Shelley and Byron were dead. John Polidori, oh, surprise, the poets died young. The romantic poets died young.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a cliche, but yeah, I'm an English romantic poet from the 1800s. I have to die young.
Yeah, if you make it out of your 20s, that's pretty good.
Yeah, for real. 27 Club. Yeah. John Polidori, the young doctor who accompanied Byron to Geneva, had killed himself with a massive dose of prussic acid at the age of 21.
Whoa.
Mary may never have known that canny John Murray had invited John Polidori to keep a diary of his travels with Byron. Edited and then transcribed by the doctor's sister, she destroyed the original. The diary was eventually published in 1911 by Polidori's nephew, William Michael Rossetti. This, together with a few details which Polidori published with his Gothic tale, The Vampire, provides a skeleton outline against which to set Mary's recollections. But Polidori also has to be treated with caution. He noted Shelley to be a 26-year-old consumptive when he was actually 23 and had been cleared of the disease. He believed Mary and Claire to be full sisters. Polidori was, however, sufficiently in Byron's confidence to know on the day after they all first met that Claire was his mistress and that Mary was not entitled to be called Mrs. Shelley. That sets the place a little bit, but also gives you an idea of what I meant when I talked about this biography, not reading like a novel, but being rigorous. Like, it's like, she has this account, he has this account. It was published 50 years after she died, blah, blah, blah. It's like, whoa, okay, we're getting into the weeds. It's good.
Yeah, you got all these facts. Every one of them's got a little asterisk next to it. Yeah.
Right. Here we go. It proved a wet and ungenial summer. It's like if Mary Shelley's life was a 1980s movie, be like her on the cover. Mary Shelley's wet and ungenial summer. Weekend at Mary Shelley's. the
Sounds
monster.
kind of hot, maybe. I don't know what
Yeah,
ungenial
yeah.
means, but
It's like a Corvette. She's next to a Corvette, and makes sense to me.
yeah.
Yeah. So she remembered in 1831 the incessant rain often confined us for days at the house. Sitting around a log fire at Byron's villa, the company, and they call it a mansion on Wikipedia, by the way, the company amused themselves with German ghost stories, which prompted Byron to propose that they each write a ghost story. Unable to think of a story, young Mary Godwin became anxious. Have you thought of a story? I was asked each morning, and each morning I was forced to reply with a mortifying negative. During one mid-June evening, the discussions turned to the nature of the principle of life. Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated, Mary noted. Galvanism had given token of such things. It was after midnight before they retired, and unable to sleep, she became possessed by her imagination as she beheld the grim terrors of her waking dream, her ghost story.
Nice.
And here's what she said. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasms of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life and stir with an uneasy half-vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world. She began writing what she assumed would be a short story. I wonder how many big novels started as short stories. Probably not a few.
No, that's a lot of them.
Yeah. The first play that I wrote that did anything for me started as like a short play. And then all it took was some instructor I had said, turn this into a full play. Like, oh, I'll go home and do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
With Percy Shelley's encouragement, she expanded this tale for her first novel, Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. All right. So got a little more here from the book, and then we're going to get into the authorship of Frankenstein and look at Frankenstein a bit more. How you feeling, Brad? You hanging in there? These episodes can go long, man.
Yeah. No, this is good. I really like this description of, there's two things about the sort of description of this idea that came to her that are interesting. One is I just like to hear about writing is such a strange process, as you can sit there and kind of bang your head against the wall for hours or days or weeks, and then suddenly it occurs to you what to do. And that can be the full story, or it can just be like in a novel, it could be just part of it, right? Figure out a chapter. This happened to me like the other day. I figured out a chapter. That's what's got to happen. And then all of a sudden it's like it possesses you. It's like it's all you think about for a little while. It completely preoccupies you. And then that description when she describes her waking dreams really interesting, because the book gets criticized. Frankenstein gets criticized for being like an offense to God, right? You've got this doctor who's playing God, and how like scandalous and offensive that is. And in that description, she's basically pointing at like the power of the story is the inherent terror of that like betrayal of God. Right. We see this a lot of times where like a work gets criticized for having some sort of like taboo theme, and like a smart read of it is usually that, oh, like the author is aware that it's taboo and why, and we're trying to understand why it's taboo and why it makes us feel that way, instead of, you get my meaning? Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, man, why don't you read the book and you would actually understand why that bothers you? Maybe.
Well, and then also like fandoms will get accused of not being savvy to it, like the way that they'll attack people, like they'll do a meme where it's like Tyler Durden and Patrick Bateman, and it's like, characters that you're not supposed to emulate that guys think are cool, and it's like that's not what most, like, maybe in the bell curve there are probably some idiots who think like Tyler Durden is the shit, but no, we like these guys, yes, a little ironically. Like we don't, there's a little wink of irony, or we know they're anti-heroes. We understand this.
Right.
But it's fun to post Bateman GIFs.
Sure.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Like It doesn't mean I want to live.
And in those cases, in Fight Clubs, it's direct. Sometimes it's a manifestation of like a part of the psyche, right? So you bring it out and you exaggerate it, and we all kind of relate to it because, like, well, we don't have to do a breakdown of Fight Club and American Psycho, but like
that's a different podcast. Yeah,
right,
yeah, totally.
Right.
You're totally right, and certainly the authors are aware. Right, everything isn't prescriptive.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it can be a warning. Like Frankenstein is a warning. It is.
It's literally a story about why you shouldn't try to play God. Right. Yeah.
Yep. On one level. On one level, there's a lot of Sure. So we're going to get a little bit about what's going on here. So they're in Geneva. Mary was still in ignorance of Claire's pregnancy. Shelley had known about it for at least a month. After his lake voyage with Byron, he had thoughtfully added a clause to his will, bequeathing a princely £6,000 to Claire, and the same sum again to an unnamed person of her choice. He may, as the editors of Mary's journal suggest, have discussed Claire's situation with Byron during the boat trip and concluded that since Byron was unwilling to take any financial responsibility, he ought to do something himself. Claire's pregnancy was the likely subject of the talks, which Mary recorded taking place between Shelley and her stepsister the day after their return from the mountains. On the 2nd of August, Shelley and Claire went up to Diodati. Mary would have liked to go with them, but Lord Byron did not seem to wish it. She wrote with evident perplexity. Shelley returned with a letter which had arrived from the lawyers. The news was not good. His father was prepared to keep a promise to increase his annual allowance by £500 and to lend him £2,000, but only if he returned to England. Grand schemes for a year of Eastern travel would have to be dropped. Fanny, a week later, sent a letter so heartbreaking in its anxiety about Godwin's finances and so wistful in its pleas for stories of the great Lord Byron that Mary and Shelley decided to find some token of their esteem. Fanny, on the day she died, was still wearing the pretty little gold watch which they bought for her in Geneva. Poor Fanny. On the 21st of August, and saying the day she died, the day she killed herself.
Right.
Yeah. On the 21st of August, Mary noted that she and Shelley had a long discussion about her story. A week later, Fanny fulfilled her promise of sending them, among other books, their own copy of Coleridge's 3 recently published dream poems. Remembering the violent effect it had worked on him, Shelley read Christabel aloud to Mary before they went to bed. This, not the earlier occasion specified in the preface, may have been the moment when Mary's imagination at last took flight, quickened by Shelley's reading and by her recent journey to a landscape of terrifying isolation and grandeur. So there you go.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about, Percy Shelley kind of helped midwife the story somewhat. Like she didn't just have it in her head. There's conversation. It's not like they co-authored it at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. But she was batting the idea around.
Well, she's in it for, it's interesting because she had this really good education and then she sort of gets plunged into this kind of like free love, hanging out with Lord Byron, the acknowledged great poet of his day, and Shelley, who would later on become understood to be one of the great poets of his generation, and talking late into the night. Like it's, we kind of mocked this for some of the like the behavior and the hypocrisy, but like that is quite a scene to find yourself part of. A very heady scene as being Mary Shelley, being 18 years old, right? It's kind of, there's darkness there too, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It's what I wasn't kidding about it being like rock and roll.
Yeah.
Rock and roll. You could read it as like the Stones renting a villa in France to record an album, but instead it's these rich poet brats, and these middle-class radical daughters getting pregnant and like having kids and telling each other ghost stories, and one of the all-time great novels comes out of it. Right. Not that she set out, it's not like she said, we're going to record an album in the studio, but it's just this fertile ground for creativity.
Yeah exactly.
Yeah Very interesting. All right, so let's see here. She later described that summer in Switzerland as the moment when I first stepped out from childhood into life. The story of the writing of Frankenstein has been fictionalized several times and has formed the basis of a number of films. This is interesting. In September 2011, the astronomer Donald Olson, after a visit to the Lake Geneva villa the previous year and inspecting data about the motion of the moon and stars, concluded that her waking dream took place between 2 and 3 a.m. on the 16th of June, 1816, several days after the initial idea by Lord Byron that they each write a ghost story. Huh. So that's how, I mean, if there's an astronomer like visiting where you came up with your idea hundreds of years later to figure out precisely when it happened to the hour based on the orientation of the stars, you might have a banger on your hands. You might have a hit.
Right.
You stamped your mark on history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so now there's a bit about the authorship. Well, her husband, Percy, encouraged her writing. The extent of Percy's contribution to the novel is unknown and has been argued over by readers and critics. Mary Shelley wrote, I certainly did not owe the suggestion of one incident, nor scarcely of one train of feeling to my husband, and yet, but for his incitement, it would never have taken the form in which it was presented to the world. She wrote that the preface to the first edition was Percy's work as far as I can recollect. There are differences in the 1818, 1823, and 1831 editions, which have been attributed to Percy's editing. Okay. Writing on the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein, literary scholar and poet Fiona Sampson asked, why hasn't Mary Shelley gotten the respect she deserves? She noted that in recent years, Percy's corrections, visible in the Frankenstein notebooks held at the Bodleian Library in Oxford, have been seized on as evidence that he must have at least co-authored the novel. In fact, when I examined the notebooks myself, I realized that Percy did rather less than any line editor working in publishing today. All right. Okay. So there's some bit of contest about the final form of the novel and how much Percy was involved. Yeah, but sure. There you are. Okay. So now they're going to return to England. They're going to return to Bath, which lovely town. You ever been over there? Oh, you got to go. You got to go to Bath. Bath is where the old Roman baths are.
Okay.
Ancient. Yeah. And it's a famous museum. And it's a beautiful old town. It's like, I think it's like 90 minutes by train from London, maybe 2 hours. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting place. Is it Jane Austen who had a house in Bath?
It sounds right, but
yeah. What is Jane Austen's connection with Bath? Between the years 1801 and 1806, Jane Austen called the city of Bath her home.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
The writer grew so fond of the ancient city that it found its way into 2 of her published novels. Okay. There you go. And the once stayed at a hotel in Bath with like a huge heated pool underneath it, and it's like huge for England. It's just like, oof, it's a scene, man. Yeah.
Sounds fun. Cool. Yeah.
Good food. Very interesting little town. Okay. On their return to England in September of 1816, Mary and Percy moved with Claire Claremont, who took lodgings nearby to Bath, where they hoped to keep Claire's pregnancy secret. All right. I got a little more from like refugees. They're like rock and roll refugees, man.
Yeah.
I mean, what a fascinating little clique.
Were there potentials for like, I mean, I don't understand. I understand. I have some sense of like the moral sense of the time, but are there like legal repercussions for any of this?
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Shelley's unable to get his children.
Right.
There's scandalous stuff can happen around this that can, I don't exactly know how much they were risking. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna throw you in prison for adultery. Apparently not. Yeah, like it wasn't quite that repressive, but yeah, the consequences are real. Okay, listen to this. Claire's condition was already becoming apparent when the trio left Geneva at the beginning of September. Any idea of returning to Bishopsgate was ruled out by the distressing news that the bailiffs had swooped after they had left the house and sequestered the possessions they had casually left there, expecting Peacock to protest their interests. A decision was taken that, while Shelley went to London to obtain the money due to him from his father and to give Byron's manuscripts to his publisher, the girls would find discreet lodgings in Bath. The Godwins must be kept in the dark. They were all agreed on that. Better and more prudent to tell them Claire was in poor health and that Bath had been recommended as a suitable place for recovery. Duplicity could, in such circumstances, be argued into a form of kindness. Dad doesn't need to know.
Right.
Yeah. Two poets, one poet, one unknown. But now we got a known poet.
Right. Yeah, boy. Yeah.
Claire had already been dumped once when she was unceremoniously dispatched to Lynmouth the previous year. Even Mary reluctantly had to agree that she could not be abandoned now when they had already committed themselves to caring for her and Byron's unborn child. It was hard to bear. For 3 months, Mary had known a state of perfect happiness, living in a landscape which enchanted her, among company which had been more stimulating and exciting than any she could remember. Now she must put all this behind her and live in dull seclusion in a fashionable town where she knew nobody and nobody knew her. That, of course, was the precise reason for going there. But the cause, the lovesick, ungrateful, and self-willed cause, was her stepsister. There were times when Mary wished Claire to the other end of the earth. Okay, so they end up moving to Bath, which is sort of how they can hide out. I mean, it's far enough away from London. It's like out west. It's almost in Wales, sort of off toward Wales. It's like the West Coast-ish. All right, so here we go. Let's see. At Colony, Mary Godwin had received 2 letters from her half-sister, Fanny Imlay, who alluded to her unhappy life. I'm going to look up where Colony is. Yeah, it's in Switzerland. Yeah, okay, of course. All right. See, Switzerland's tricky because you got Italian names, you got German names, you got French names, you got there'll be like Latin names. It's all over. It's all over the place. It's all over the place.
Sure.
An actual democracy, by the way. They do referenda. They will actually vote on issues. So it's very difficult to emigrate
has anybody else
Switzerland.
Has anybody else tried that?
A lot of people have claimed they've tried.
Right.
I don't remember on voting on everybody having a casino in their phone, but now everybody. I don't remember voting on whether Disney should be allowed to be a sports bookie.
Right.
But it's democracy, Brad.
Right.
Democracy democracy's a thing that happens while you're podcasting.
Maybe they're voting on it right now and we just don't know.
I mean, we did elect the senators who were bribed to allow that to happen in the span of 10 years.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody cares.
No.
Nobody cares. Except the Swiss. The Swiss care. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Good
Getting back on track. Different podcast. Oh my God. You know what I need to do is I need to get AI to generate an image of Mickey Mouse as a bookie, getting increasingly angry at you for not paying off your debt. Mickey's going to break your fucking knees. It's nice watch you have there.
Yeah,
just Mickey Mouse is like this like satanic 1940s mob bookie.
Right. Getting more, getting angrier and angrier
because you gotta keep voting, or you gotta keep putting money down on the Gophers. You should know better by now, Couchman. All right, we have fun. So in any case, Mary had received in Switzerland 2 letters from her half-sister, Fanny Imlay, who alluded to her unhappy life. On the 9th of October, Fanny wrote an alarming letter from Bristol that sent Percy Shelley racing off to search for her without success. On the morning of October 10th, Fanny Imlay was found dead in a room at a Swansea inn, along with a suicide note and a laudanum bottle. Swansea would be Wales.
Okay.
On the 10th of December, Percy Shelley's wife, Harriet, was discovered drowned in the Serpentine, a lake in Hyde Park of London. So these suicides are bam, bam.
Yeah.
Her own half-sister, the famous bastard, poor thing, kills herself. And then, here we are. Let me see. I want to make sure I get it right. Yeah. Shelley was back at Bath on the 14th of December after a meeting with Leigh Hunt. The following day, a letter came from his friend Thomas Hookham. whom he had asked to undertake a search for Harriet. The contents were shocking. A body found in the Serpentine had been identified as that of Harriet Smith. This, it appeared, was the name under which Harriet Shelley had been living since early September at lodgings near her family's home in Chapel Street. A newspaper report published in the Times on the 12th of December declared that Miss Smith had been missing for 6 weeks and that she had been far advanced in pregnancy.
Oh.
Her husband was alleged to have been abroad. It was assumed that she had been seduced in his absence. It is just possible that the unborn child was Shelley's. No record exists for the period when he was in London prior to the journey to Geneva. Did he seeking to comfort Harriet at a time when he was leaving the country for an undetermined period make love to her? It is not much less likely than the generally accepted view that Harriet had an affair with an officer and when he was called abroad, returned to live with her family until her condition became noticeable. Claire, in her old age, insisted that this had been the case, but her memory was unreliable and her source information was probably Shelley himself. It goes on. But in any case, tragic. Whoever the father was.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh.
Tragic. And you have to wonder what Mary felt.
Sure.
Damn, dude. I mean, it's like, when the hangover of the 60s ended, we got the 70s. Right. Like there's, a lot of babies were conceived in clouds of bong smoke.
Right.
And a lot of real estate licenses were acquired in the 80s. Like,
yeah, right.
The party ends at some point. Right. There's that great speech in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas where it's like where you can see the wave roll back.
Yeah.
Like, you can only take this thing so far.
Yeah. And now we're seeing in the life of Mary Shelley, we're seeing that wave and Percy sort of seeing that wave roll back a little bit, at least. Yeah.
Your sister kills herself and the father of your child, his wife kills herself and her unborn child.
Yeah. Which might be your lover's child,
which might also be his. Yeah.
This
is Art of Darkness, the podcast about the dark side of Kevin, the dark side of creativity. I'm Kevin, the dark side of Kevin. I told you at the beginning of this episode, I'm a little tired. I'm a little overworked right now, but I love doing the show. This is so much fun, Brad. I hope you're having a good time. I hope the audience is having a good time. Reminder, find us at artofdarkpod.com. We are there. We are on Telegram, t.me/artofdarkpod, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Brad mans the Twitter, the X, twitter.com/artofdarkpod. And we did have that Spotify Wrapped stuff happen. That was pretty fun. It was fun to see. It's nice to know everybody's out there. We appreciate you all. Yeah. And
season 3, we grew a lot. Yep.
We did. This is we do. Each season goes by the calendar year because that's all we can remember. We're not going to do any funny business. It's January 1st to the end of the year. So
we started in 2021, so that it was season 1, 21. That kept it easy for us.
Oh, I just realized that. That's so nice.
In 2030, it's all confusing.
It's pandemonium. It's all right. Yeah. Well, we'll have other problems by 2030.
Yeah,
Brad.
Sure. Yeah.
We'll have other things to worry about. We'll be working for the mouse. We'll be working collecting debts.
Yeah, we'll have to pay. We got to pay the legal bills for that bit you just did about the AI.
Yeah. Mickey Mouse. All right. Why don't you tell people? I'm going to use the bathroom one more time, Brad. Tell the good listeners. Tell our beloved, our cherished listeners all over the world. Tell them what we have coming up in 2024. Tease them. Give the tasty treats.
Yeah. I mean, we got a couple more episodes left in season 3, 2023. But after that, we're going to start season 4 with the full AOD treatment of William S. Burroughs. People who've been following along will know that the very first episode we did was my attempt to cover William S. Burroughs, but we didn't really know what we were doing. So we tried to do it in an hour. And as you know, you can't really do an episode like this in this kind of depth in an hour. So we're going to do that. We're also going to talk about Kevin's going to run and do an F. Scott Fitzgerald part 2. We did our first live episode in St. Paul earlier this year, and we did, we don't do 4 hours live. Nobody wants to sit in a chair for 4 hours. So we're going to follow up and complete the F. Scott Fitzgerald story. We're also going to be talking about Robert E. Howard, the man behind Conan the Barbarian and many other creations, as we will soon learn. Other people we're going to be talking about, Wagner, the Marquis de Sade, Marshall McLuhan. We're doing 2 back-to-back Shakespeare episodes, one on William Shakespeare and the other Edward de Vere. We're going to solve this conundrum. We're going to solve this conflict about who the real William Shakespeare was. We're going to talk about David Bowie, Fela Kuti, Flannery O'Connor, Wittgenstein, and I believe we're going to be talking about Cormac McCarthy in the fall of next year. Not to mention, of course, Patreon exclusive After Dark episodes for each and every episode we do. Countless Darkroom episodes, some of which are already on the calendar, but I'm not going to spill the tea on that quite yet. As well as the continuation of the Bookends Reading Club. So you've got a lot to look forward to on Our Darkness in season 4.
Going to get even darker in season 4.
Yeah.
It's going to get weirder.
Yeah.
I don't like reading about all these dead babies.
No, this is a lot. This one is maybe the highest, this might be the most children who did not make it to the end of the story.
Children and mothers, and it's gnarly. Yeah. Gnarly. And yet they're modern. They're moderns. These are modern people.
Well, especially these people, right, that we're talking about. They're yes. Yeah.
Yeah. They're right on the edge of modernity. Yeah. It's wild. All right. Let's press on. See if we can get, oh God, I'm looking at my outline. Oh, I'm on page 9 of 24.
Oh boy. All right.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna see if I can sort of speed this thing up a little bit. See if I can bring us in for a smooth landing.
Okay.
Both suicides were hushed up. Harriet's family obstructed Percy Shelley's efforts, fully supported by Mary Godwin, to assume custody of his 2 children by Harriet. So Harriet's family's pissed.
Sure.
Rightly.
Yeah.
His lawyers advised him to improve his case by marrying. So he and Mary, who was pregnant again, geez, take a break, man. Just get geez, dude, write a poem. Go write a poem.
Right.
Yeah. They got married on the 30th of December at St. Mildred's Church, Bread Street, London. Mr. and Mrs. Godwin were present in the marriage, ended the family rift. Okay.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Claire Claremont gave birth to a baby girl on the 13th of January, at first called Alba, later Allegra. In March of that year, the Chancery Court ruled Percy Shelley morally unfit to assume custody of his children, and later placed them with a clergyman's family. Also in March, the Shelleys moved with Claire and Alba to Albion House at Marlow, Buckinghamshire, a large damp building on the River Thames. You just assume it's a damp building. If it's on the Thames, it's damp. The place that we lived in when I was over there was like, oh my God, it's such a dump. It's like, and it was not cheap either. Like, I remember the first rain came, and you may have heard it rains in London. It rains a lot in London.
Yeah.
Like a real rain came, water just through the ceiling.
Really?
Just right down, had to set buckets down.
Oh God.
And it was November. It was November one year. And just the heat went out. Just the heat goes out. And you'll call over there, and somebody will be like, we'll get the part. It'll be a week, 2 weeks later. You have no heat, no hot water. We're like taking showers. God. This is 2006,
right?
You're like taking showers over, at the equivalent of like the YMCA, just to get warm. And that was fun. That was fun times.
Yeah,
fun times. Yeah. It was, in any case, damp on the Thames. There, Mary Shelley gave birth to her 3rd child, Clara. At Marlow, they entertained their new friends, Marianne and Leigh Hunt, who worked hard at their writing, and they often discussed politics. Leigh Hunt, best known as James Henry Leigh Hunt, best known as Leigh Hunt, was an English critic, essayist, and poet. And he co-founded The Examiner, a leading intellectual journal expounding radical principles.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Early in the summer of 1817, Mary Shelley finished Frankenstein, which was published anonymously in January of 1818. Reviewers and readers assumed that Percy Shelley was the author, since the book was published with his preface and dedicated to his political hero, William Godwin. All right. So now we're going to read a little bit. Then I'm going to read a summary of Frankenstein. I'm going to read some from Frankenstein. Then I'm going to get us into the Shelley's untimely demise and kind of blast through the back half of her life before we close down the main episode, just to give you an idea. We're not going to go for another 3 hours. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Frankenstein is an 1818 novel. Frankenstein tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist who creates a sapient creature in an unorthodox scientific experiment. Shelley started writing the story when she was 18, and the first edition was published anonymously on the 1st of January, 1818, when she was only 20. Her name first appeared in the second edition, which was published in Paris in 1821. All right, so we sort of know this background. All right. Let's see. After thinking for days about her story, Shelley was inspired to write Frankenstein after imagining a scientist who created life and was horrified by what he had made. And really, one wonders, and I'm sure critics and academics have pointed this out, how it could potentially be seen as it's like she's had children, she sort of created life, and then they die,
right?
And there's deep horror,
right.
You know.
Yeah, and so it's this thing that has the potential to be beautiful, miraculous, and then like it takes a turn, and then suddenly it's like as much pain and horror as you can experience. Yeah.
Yes. So it's possible she used some of that energy.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and then her imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is from Wikipedia. Though Frankenstein is infused with elements of the Gothic novel and the Romantic movement, Brian Aldiss has argued for regarding it as the first true science fiction story. In contrast to previous stories with fantastical elements resembling those of later science fiction, Aldiss states the central character makes a deliberate decision and turns to modern experiments in the laboratory to achieve fantastic results. The novel has had a considerable influence on literature and on popular culture. It has spawned a complete genre of horror stories, films, and plays. And since the publication of the novel, the name Frankenstein has often been used to refer to the monster rather than his creator or father. So don't say he's a Frankenstein. No, he's a Frankenstein monster. Unless you're talking about scientists who are monsters, then you could say he's a Frankenstein.
That's right.
And you'd be right. And there have been monstrous scientists, and there are monstrous scientists. Science is not an ideology. It's a practice. It's a thing that you do. It's not a thing that you think or believe in. We'll just leave it at that. I'll let you can make up your own mind about who the real monster is. But it's sort of like she created like the mad scientist idea.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's, whether or not it's the first, you'll always, if you spend as much time trolling around in Wikipedia and like literary history related, you'll find about 15 different claims for the first science fiction novel. So which is really the first, but I do think she did sort of create this trope of the mad scientist. There probably were stories about like crazed alchemists and crazed like wizards doing things before, but I'm not sure that there's a prior mad scientist story proper. So yeah,
impressive. I mean, and the amount of reach that this has, I mean, it's one of these things you'll prepare an episode and sometimes you're like, oh, I see this everywhere. This has been everywhere in my cultural consumption from horror movies. Something
like it gets so disseminated that like you just stop recognizing it, and then doing an episode like this, it's like, oh yeah, that's everywhere. It's like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to kind of blast through the structure of the book because I think it's important. So Frankenstein is a framed story written in epistolary form. Set in the 18th century, it documents a fictional correspondence between Captain Robert Walton and his sister Margaret Walton Saville. Robert Walton is a failed writer who sets out to explore the North Pole in hopes of expanding scientific knowledge. During the voyage, The crew spots a dog sled driven by a gigantic figure. A few hours later, the crew rescues a nearly frozen and emaciated man named Victor Frankenstein. Frankenstein has been in pursuit of the gigantic man observed by Walton's crew. Frankenstein starts to recover from his exertion. He sees in Walton the same obsession that has destroyed him and recounts the story of his life's miseries to Walton as a warning. It's even explicitly a warning in the novel. The recounted story serves as the frame. Victor begins by talking about his childhood. He's born in Naples, Italy, into a wealthy Genevan family. He has younger brothers. They're sons of Alphonse Frankenstein and the former Caroline Beaufort. From a young age, Victor has a strong desire to understand the world. He's obsessed with studying theories of alchemists. Though when he is older, he realizes that such theories are considerably outdated. When Victor is 5 years old, his parents adopt Elizabeth Lavenza, the orphan daughter of an expropriated Italian nobleman, whom Victor later marries. Victor's parents later take in another child, Justine Moritz, who becomes William's nanny. Weeks before he leaves for university in Ingolstadt in Germany, his mother dies. So we have a dead mother of scarlet fever. Victor buries himself in his experiments to deal with his grief. At the university, he excels at chemistry and other sciences, soon developing a secret technique to impart life to non-living matter. He undertakes the creation of a humanoid, but due to the difficulty in replacing the minute parts of the human body, Victor makes the creature tall, about 8 feet in height, and proportionally large. Despite Victor's selecting its features to be beautiful, upon animation, the creature is instead hideous, with dull and watery yellow eyes and yellow skin that barely conceals the muscles and blood vessels underneath, as we read. Repulsed by his work, he flees. While wandering the streets the next day, he meets his childhood friend, Henry Clerval, and takes Clerval back to his apartment, fearful of Clerval's reaction if he sees the monster. However, when Victor returns to his laboratory, the creature is gone. And all this stuff is like somewhat comic in a way. I mean, it's like you didn't have a plan. You're just going to bring this thing. It's very much like kind of our relationship to God and how much anxiety people have about this. Wait, you just threw us here, and where are you?
Yeah.
Where did you go?
Right.
You're our creator. Like we need, it's very much that philosophical kind of that thread of like, are we alone? Does our creator hate us? Why would you make us and give us this much pain? I mean, it's real heavy theology hours here.
Yeah.
On Art of Darkness. I mean, these are real questions that everyone at some point in life, more or less, wrestles with, whether it's framed in that exact language or not.
Yeah.
People struggle with this. Why am I here? Why did you make me? You owe me an answer. Right. That's a very big theme from the monster. You owe me a woman version of me, and you owe me answers.
Right.
Why did you abandon me?
Right.
Why? Why? You made me, and you're repulsed by me.
Right. Yeah. It made me to be cruel to me. Like
how about thinking about her relationship with her father at this time too? Right. You made me this, Dad, and now you're disowning me, and you're
Right. You won't want to come back to England. You don't want to talk to me. Right.
We got to hide out. I have to evade you. I have to hide from you, which is what he ends up doing with the monster and everything. He has to hide from. So there's a lot going on. This monster, this creature contains multitudes.
Right.
And because it does, it probably explains in part its widespread appeal.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's great. I've never thought about Frankenstein on this level, and I'm glad we're doing this because it's becoming so much more of a richer text as we go here.
Yeah. So he returns to his lab. The creature is gone. Victor falls ill from the experience and is nursed back to health by Clerval. After a 4-month recovery, he receives a letter from his father notifying him of the murder of his brother William. Upon arriving in Geneva, Victor sees the creature near the crime scene and becomes convinced that his creation is responsible for the murder. Justine Moritz, William's nanny, is convicted of the crime after William's locket, which contained a miniature picture of Caroline, is found in her pocket. Victor knows that no one will believe him if he tries to clear Justine's name, and she is hanged. Ravaged by grief and guilt, Victor retreats to the mountains. While he hikes through Mont Blanc, Mer de Glace, he is suddenly approached by the creature who pleads for Victor to hear his tale. And then we get into the creature's narrative. And briefly, it's just intelligent and articulate. The creature relates his first days of life living alone in the wilderness. He found that people are afraid of him and hated him due to his appearance, which led him to fear and hide from them. And it goes on. While living in an abandoned structure connected to a cottage, he grew fond of a poor family living there. Secretly living next to the college for months, the creature learned to speak by listening to the family and taught himself to read after discovering a lost satchel of books in the woods. And I think one of the books he reads is Paradise Lost.
Right.
When he saw his reflection in a pool, he realized his appearance was hideous, and it horrified him as much as it horrified normal humans.
Oof.
All right. So I want to read from the creature's narrative. I believe it's volume 2. Let me see. I want to make sure I'm getting it right. Yeah, this is always worth reading and rereading. Yeah, here it is. And it's all in quotes. Let's see. I'll just read a bit of the sort of monologuing from the demon. I expected this reception, said the demon. All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends. Abhorrent monster, fiend that thou art, the tortures of hell are too mild a vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you reproach me with your creation. Come on, then, that I may extinguish the spark which I so negligently bestowed. My rage was without bounds. I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one against the existence of another. He easily eluded me and said, "Be calm. I entreat you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred on my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine, my joints more supple. But I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, the which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed." Goes on. You get a sense of the writing.
Yeah.
It reaches a pitch that's almost yellowish, kind of. It starts to get a little maudlin and over the top, but it's fitting and it's consistent. It stays there, and you're like, I'm going with this. This is like, it's operatic and dramatic, and there's a lot of subtext, and there's a lot of like,
I like it.
And it's got action, and it moves.
Right. And then you start to see too, like I feel like it's been a long, long time since I saw the sort of classic Hollywood cinema adaptation. But it felt like in that one, the monster is, I don't know if a dumb brute is exactly the word, but like, it seems like it's a little bit more of a senseless kind of like stumbling through life. And I think at one point, I think it was cut out of the original, but like the monster sees a flower floating in the river, and then he like has an encounter with a young girl, and he throws her in the river, like just like he threw the flower in, right? Like, oh, that must, so like, yeah.
That's what I mean about like it. Your impression of it won't match the text if you've never read it. It's not what it seems to be. There's a lot more going on. The creature demands that Victor create a female companion like himself. He's thirsty, man. He argues that as a living being, he has a right to happiness, which that's a serious political idea. That's still life, liberty, right?
Right.
And, there you go. The creature promises that he and his mate will vanish into the South American wilderness, never to reappear, if Victor grants his request. Should Victor refuse, the creature threatens to kill Victor's remaining friends and loved ones and not stop until he completely ruins him. Fearing for his family, Victor reluctantly agrees. The creature says he will watch over the progress. So then Victor's narrative resumes, and he goes back to England with his friend Clerval. They separate, and in Scotland, Victor thinks the creature is following him. He works on the female creature on Orkney, which is a place.
Scottish Isles, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's an island. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Orkney Islands. I think it's like Norse.
I think it's Scottish.
Yeah, it's Scots, Old Norse. It comes from like Old Norse, but yeah, it's Scotland, way up there in Scotland. Yeah. He has premonitions. He fears the female will hate the creature or become more evil than he is. He's like, oh no, I'm going to make a female version of this. This guy's already trying to kill me. What is this one going to want?
Right.
It's a million things I could say, and I'm not going to say a single one of them. Right?
No,
I'm just going to whip on by that. But yeah, he's rightly anxious about having.
Well, yeah,
it
didn't go so well the first time. So yes,
there you go.
Yeah.
Even more worrying to him is the idea that creating the second creature might lead to the breeding of a race that could plague humankind. He tears apart the unfinished female creature after he sees the creature, who had indeed followed Victor, watching through a window. The creature immediately bursts through the door to confront Victor and tries to threaten him into working again, but Victor refuses. The creature leaves, but gives a final threat. I will be with you on your wedding night. Victor interprets this as a threat upon his life, believing that the creature will kill him after he finally becomes happy. Victor sails out to sea to dispose of his instruments, falls asleep in the boat, is unable to return to shore because of changes in the winds, and ends up being blown to the Irish coast. When Victor lands in Ireland, he's arrested for Clerval's murder, as the creature had strangled Clerval and left the corpse to be found where his creator had arrived. Victor suffers another mental breakdown and wakes up to find himself in prison. However, he is shown to be innocent, and after being released, he returns home with his father, who has restored to Elizabeth some of her father's fortune. In Geneva, Victor is about to marry Elizabeth and prepares to fight the creature to the death, arming himself with pistols and a dagger. The night following their wedding, Victor asks Elizabeth to stay in her room while he looks for the fiend. While Victor searches the house and grounds, the creature strangles Elizabeth. From the window, Victor sees the creature, who tauntingly points at Elizabeth's corpse. Victor tries to shoot him, but the creature escapes. Victor's father, weakened by age and by the death of Elizabeth, dies a few days later. Seeking revenge, Victor pursues the creature through Europe, then north into Russia, with his adversary staying ahead of him every step of the way. Eventually, the chase leads to the Arctic Ocean and then on towards the North Pole. And Victor reaches a point where he is within a mile of the creature, but he collapses from exhaustion and hypothermia before he can find his quarry, allowing the creature to escape. Eventually, the ice around Victor's sled breaks apart, and the resultant ice floe comes within range of Walton's ship. At the end, we have Captain Walton's conclusion, because it's a frame story, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of Victor's narrative, Walton resumes telling the story. A few days after the creature vanishes, the ship becomes trapped in pack ice and several crewmen die in the cold before the rest of Walton's crew insists on returning south once it's freed. Upon hearing the crew's demands, Victor is angered and, despite his condition, gives a powerful speech to them. He reminds them of why they chose to join the expedition and that it is hardship and danger, not comfort, that define a glorious undertaking such as theirs. He urges them to be men, not cowards. However, although the speech makes an impression on the crew, it is not enough to change their minds, and when the ship is freed, Walton regretfully decides to return south. Victor, even though he is in a very weak condition, states that he will go on by himself. He is adamant that the creature must die. Victor dies shortly thereafter, telling Walton in his last words to seek happiness in tranquility and avoid ambition. Avoid ambition. Don't make a monster.
Yeah.
Walton discovers the creature on his ship. It's like a movie, isn't it? Of course. Yeah. Now Walton has been told the story, and Walton's confronted by this creature, this 8-foot tall monster that this fucking crazy scientist made. Like, yeah. And one wonders, like, does Walton believe him? right?
Right.
Is Walton like, you're full of it? Oh no, it's on the ship.
Here it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Walton discovers a creature in the ship mourning over Victor's body. The creature tells Walton that Victor's death has not brought him peace. Rather, his crimes had made him even more miserable than Victor ever was. And then I won't read the very end of the description because I want to save that for the end of the pod.
Yeah.
But
now, right at the end of the novel, people don't know this. Frankenstein's monster says, "You can just call me Frankenstein. That's fine."
Yeah, that's the last line. You can just call me Frankenstein for hundreds of years. Just call me Frankenstein. No, it's Mr. Frankenstein. Don't Dr. Frankenstein. I have a doctorate in education. You don't have to call me Dr. Frankenstein. We don't stand in formalities here.
Yeah.
Oh no, I've choked you to death.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, worth a reread and worth looking at again. Like it's a fascinating novel. I'm so glad that I got to do this episode so that I can sort of like cover it. We'll read a little more from the novel as we go. And there's a lot. The Wikipedia on this is just it's its own. It accounts for a number of the pages that I have.
Sure.
So I'm just going to sort of like bounce through these. Just real quickly, why is it called Modern Prometheus, right? It's a subtitle, though modern editions now drop it. Prometheus, in versions of Greek mythology, was the Titan who created humans in the image of the gods so that they could have a spirit breathed into them at the behest of Zeus. Prometheus then taught humans to hunt, but after he tricked Zeus into accepting poor quality offerings from humans, Zeus kept fire from humankind. Prometheus took back the fire from Zeus to give to humanity. When Zeus discovered this, he sentenced Prometheus to be eternally punished by fixing him to a rock of Caucasus, where each day an eagle pecked out his liver, only for the liver to regrow the next day because of his immortality as a god. As a Pythagorean, or believer in an essay on abstinence from animal foods as a moral duty by Joseph Ritson, this is another thing. Like vegetarianism was also a thing at the time among these people. So again, big nothing changes energy.
Right.
You're telling me these people are also vegetarians?
Yeah, they were doing yoga and breath work. Yeah.
No, they were just fucking, dude. They didn't need yoga. The only breath work was, Lord Byron just
huffing and puffing,
getting it in. Yeah, huffing and puffing. That's right. Well, anyway, Mary Shelley saw Prometheus not as a hero, but rather as something of a devil, and blamed him for bringing fire to humanity and thereby seducing the human race to the vice of eating meat. Percy wrote several essays on what became known as vegetarianism, including A Vindication of Natural Diet. Okay, so there you are. Byron was particularly attached to the play Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus, and Percy Shelley soon wrote his own Prometheus Unbound. The term modern Prometheus was derived from Immanuel Kant, who described Benjamin Franklin as the Prometheus of modern times in reference to his experiments with electricity. Okay, great.
Cool.
Okay, so, and we'll read in the After Dark, we're going to read some of that, one of the Prometheus poems when we close out the main episode. So I'm gonna plow through the remainder of the bio.
You're doing great.
Oh, good. Are you good? I hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah, my whole perspective of Frankenstein as a text has changed. This is cool.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. At Marlow, Mary edited the joint journal of the group's 1814 Continental Journey, adding material written in Switzerland in 1816, along with Percy's poem Mont Blanc. The result was the history of a 6 weeks tour published in November 1817. That autumn, Percy Shelley often lived away from home in London to evade creditors. We talked about this. The threat of debtors' prison combined with their ill health and fears of losing custody of their children contributed to the couple's decision to leave England for Italy on the 12th of March, 1818, taking Claire, Claremont, and Alba with them. They had no intention of returning. One of the party's first tasks on arriving in Italy was to hand Alba over to Byron, who was living in Venice. He had agreed to raise her so long as Claire had nothing more to do with her. And the Shelleys, then who could have seen that coming? Claire and Byron, it's not working out. That's a pity. The Shelleys then embarked on a roving existence, never settling in any one place for long. Along the way, they accumulated a circle of friends and acquaintances who often moved with them. They're kind of hippies. It's a road show. Yeah. The couple devoted their time to writing, reading, learning, sightseeing, and socializing. The Italian adventure was, however, blighted for Mary Shelley by the deaths of both her children, Clara in September 1818 in Venice and William in June of 1819 in Rome. These losses left her in a deep depression that isolated her from Percy Shelley, who wrote in his notebook, "My dearest Mary, wherefore hast thou gone and left me in this dreary world alone? Thy form is here indeed a lovely one, but thou art fled, gone down a dreary road that leads to sorrow's most obscure abode. For thine own sake I cannot follow thee. Do thou return for mine." Good poet. For a time, Mary Shelley found comfort only in her writing. The birth of her fourth child, Percy Florence, on the 12th of November, 1819, finally lifted her spirits, though she nursed the memory of her lost children till the end of her life. Italy provided the Shelleys, Byron, and other exiles with political freedom unattainable at home. Despite its associations with personal loss, Italy became, for Mary Shelley, a country which memory painted as paradise. Their Italian years were a time of intense intellectual and creative activity for both Shelleys. While Percy composed a series of major poems, Mary wrote the novel Matilda, the historical novel Valperga, and the plays Proserpine and Midas. And just real quickly, Matilda deals with a father's incestuous love for his daughter.
Oh boy.
Okay. Plot of this is narrating from her deathbed. Matilda, a young woman barely in her 20s, writes her story as a way of explaining her actions to her friend Woodville. Her narration follows her lonely upbringing and climaxes at a point when her unnamed father confesses his incestuous love for her. This is then followed by his suicide by drowning and her ultimate demise. Her relationship with the gifted young poet Woodville fails to reverse Matilda's emotional withdrawal or prevent her lonely death.
Whoa!
So this is a yeah. Okay. It's a 104-page novella.
Yeah.
So okay. The story may be seen as a metaphor for what happens when a woman, ignorant of all consequences, follows her own heart while dependent on her male benefactor. Matilda has also been seen as an example of redefining female Gothic narratives. An important characteristic of this redefining genre often includes female narrators having more control over the story than was common at the time. Okay. I'm glad we took that little detour because it's, I haven't devoted a lot of time to, the other works, but they're out there. And if this episode has inspired you at all and you like Frankenstein, there's more. And now that you know the biography a little bit, you can sort of see where maybe some of that, comes from. I've got a little bit about this novel, Valperga, it's called Valperga, or The Life and Adventures of Castruccio, Prince of Lucca. It's an 1823 historical novel set amongst the wars of the Guelphs and Ghibellines.
Hey, the Guelphs and the Ghibellines.
The Guelphs and the Ghibellines. They're back. I'm feeling Guelphy. I'm feeling like I'm feeling like a Guelph tonight. And of course, this is Dante.
Right.
And she would refer to Dante all the time. I mean,
yeah. Now, is she a white? Is she side with the white Guelphs, the black Guelphs?
Listen, I don't know. I'll read. No, I have. Yeah, right. I don't even remember what Guelph is. Which way is up?
Right.
It got.
Can't tell my Guelph from my right.
Yeah, no, that's good.
That wasn't that good.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. Guelph is a perfectly fine way to ruin a nice walk, is to quote Oscar Wilde. Another subject we've done. Yeah. But yeah, no, I guess it got good reviews. And through the perspective of medieval history, Shelley addresses a live issue in post-Napoleonic Europe, the right of autonomously governed communities to political liberty in the face of imperialistic encroachment. She's no slouch. I mean, she's writing these novels and these works that are like politically relevant to their day. Mm-hmm. And this is, she's writing these like, Frankenstein had been published, but I'm not sure how big it had quite become yet. And so she's a writer. She's a writer. She's not like a one hit. Like, you're not going to, she didn't ever outdo this. They're not going to have the other stuff in every single bookstore everywhere. But, it only takes one of these to make your name forever. And there's more happening too. And they're not all like, here's another monster story.
Right. She didn't just do the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And she wrote some plays too. She wrote Valperga to help alleviate her father's financial difficulties, as Percy refused to assist him further. She was often physically ill and prone to depression. She also had to cope with Percy's interest in other women. Since Mary Shelley shared his belief in the non-exclusivity of marriage, she formed emotional ties of her own. And, probably various affairs, happened. Certainly on Percy's side, I would imagine. In December of 1818, the Shelleys traveled south to Naples, where they stayed for 3 months. In 1820, they found themselves plagued by accusations and threats from former servants whom Shelley had dismissed in Naples. The pair revealed that in Naples, Percy Shelley had registered as his child by Mary Shelley a 2-month-old baby named Elena Adelaide Shelley. They claimed that Claire Claremont was the baby's mother. So there's scandals, right?
Oh,
there's
boy.
different interpretations. Okay.
Oh boy.
All right. So they can't escape this. They're always in it, right?
Yeah.
They're it people. There's always something going on. Yeah.
Well, Percy is just no consideration for the consequences of anything. It doesn't seem like.
I tell you what, man. I mean, the poet resident on Art of Darkness is Jason Gallagher, and he seems like a stand-up, put-together dude.
He does,
right?
Yeah.
So, and he has a teaching positions, and so again, not all poets, but Percy is like he and Lord Byron, they were playing the part.
Yeah,
they are going to be that thing. And
it's hard to imagine Percy being like, you know what? I don't know if I should do that.
Right,
just having that moment of like, nah, I'm not going to go there.
No filter. No filter. All in.
Yeah.
After leaving Naples, the Shelleys settled in Rome, the city where her husband wrote. The meanest streets were strewed with truncated columns, broken capitals, and sparkling fragments of granite or porphyry. The voice of dead time in still vibrations is breathed from these dumb things, animated and glorified as they were by man. Rome inspired her to begin writing the unfinished novels Valerius, The Reanimated Rome, where the eponymous hero resists the decay of Rome and the machinations of superstitious Catholicism. The writing of her novel was broken off when her son William died of malaria. Shelley bitterly commented that she had come to Italy to improve her husband's health, and instead the Italian climate had just killed her 2 children, leading her to write, "May you, my dear Marianne, never know what it is to lose 2 only and lovely children in 1 year, to watch their dying moments, and then at last to be left childless and forever miserable." To deal with her grief, Shelley wrote the novella The Fields of Fancy, which became Matilda, dealing with a young woman whose beauty inspired incestuous love in her father, who ultimately commits suicide to stop himself from acting on his passion for her daughter, while she spends the rest of her life full of despair about the unnatural love I had inspired. Okay, we got that. Summer of 1822, a pregnant Mary moved with Percy, Claire, and Edward and Jane Williams to it's isolated villa called Villa Magni at the sea's edge near the hamlet of San Terenzo in the Bay of Lerici. Once they were settled in, Percy broke the evil news to Claire that her daughter Allegra had died of typhus in a convent. Mary Shelley was just, right? Like, it's just like a cavalcade of, we just got dead kids. It's just like, are they, I think it's just the time, but like, are these people particularly unlucky? It's just like, damn, man.
Yeah.
Holy moly. Going on, she was distracted and unhappy in the cramped and remote villa, which she came to regard as a dungeon. On the 16th of June, she miscarried, losing so much blood that she nearly died. Rather than wait for a doctor, Percy redeems himself a little bit here, Brett. Sat her in a bath of ice to stanch the bleeding, an act the doctor later told him saved her life.
Okay.
All right. Big save the cat moment for Percy.
He should have done that. If he'd have done that earlier in his life, then
All was not well between the couple that summer, however, and Percy spent more time with Jane Williams than with his depressed and debilitated wife. Much of the short poetry Shelley wrote at San Terenzo involved Jane rather than Mary. When that eye of Sauron of the poet turns from you to the hot young thing down the street, you got a poet problem. I don't know. You're in
Yeah.
serious trouble. You need to bring the ring to Mount Doom. At that point. Throw that ring into Mount Doom when the poet turns his eye, because you got to get that eye back on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
In any case, the coast offered Percy Shelley and Edward Williams the chance to enjoy their perfect plaything for the summer, a new sailing boat. The boat had been designed by Daniel Robertson, an admirer of Byron, Edward Trelawney, who had joined the party in January of 1822. I'm introduced this Trelawney fellow because he shows up a lot. He was a British biographer, novelist, and adventurer. You like that in your Wikipedia bio?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's best known for his friendship with Shelley and Byron. He was born to a family of modest income, but extensive ancestral history. Though his father became wealthy while he was a child, Edward had an antagonistic relationship with him. After an unhappy childhood, he was sent away to a school. He was assigned as a volunteer in the Royal Navy shortly before he turned 13. I think I read somewhere that like they kind of liked him because he was like from the other side of the tracks. He was sort of like he was a military Navy guy, and it was sort of like a earthy, something. Yeah. Nothing wrong with the Navy. Nothing wrong with sailors. They might have done better if he had been on that fucking boat, which we're coming to.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. On the 1st of July, 1822, Percy Shelley, Edward Ellerkin Williams, and Captain Daniel Roberts sailed south down the coast to Livorno. I mean, this is real the day the music died energy. Like for the time. This is what we're dealing with here. So let me read from the bio here about what happened. Let's see. On the 4th of July, a loving note to Jane, my dearest friend, arrived at the villa from Shelley, together with a brisk and businesslike letter for Mary. She must have felt ready to weep when she read it. He had not looked for houses at Panano. He could not say when he would return. The rest of the letter was taken up with news of their friends. Byron, while willing to make a handsome gift of the copyright of his latest poem, The Vision of Judgment, for the first number of their new magazine, was unlikely to be able to offer further support since he was preparing to follow Teresa's family into a second exile. 4 days later, despite uncertain weather conditions, Shelley, Williams, and their boy sailor set out for Lerici from Livorno, carrying 50 pounds, which Shelley had borrowed from Byron. The conditions have been variously described, but it seems clear that the Don Juan sailed into one of the sudden summer squalls for which this part of the coast was notorious. With no deck and sails which were difficult to bring down in a hurry, a sudden gust was all that was needed to swamp it. Reports came later that either one or two of the feluccas, which regularly undertook the journey from Livorno to Genoa, had seen the little boat struck by baffling winds. Shouts to bring down the sails had been disregarded. At their next glance, the Don Juan had been engulfed. By the 11th of July, a Thursday, the three women at the Villa Magni were growing anxious. Only continuing bad weather kept Jane from having herself rowed to Livorno the following day. Friday was the day on which the week's post was delivered. It brought them a letter for Shelley from Hunt. Opening it, Mary saw that Hunt was asking for news of the traveler's safe return, having heard that the boat had left Livorno in a storm. The date of departure, 8th of July, was named. I trembled all over, Mary wrote in the long and harrowing account of the tragedy she sent to Mrs. Gisborne in August. Jane read it. Then it is all over, she said. No, my dear Jane, I cried. It's not all over. But this suspense is dreadful. And then it goes on. Let's see if I have. Yeah. The bad news had already come, although Mary did not know it. Claire, instructed by Trelawney to open the post in his absence, had read a letter in which Daniel Roberts said that 2 bodies, not yet formally identified, had been found. Acting as messenger was beyond her. She wrote a pathetic note to Leigh Hunt on the 19th of July, asking for advice and ending helplessly. I know not what further to add except that their case is desperate in every respect, and death would be the greatest kindness to us all. Yeah. So, Shelley's dead. He's dead at I don't even exactly know what age.
He's 29. I think he's 29.
Something like that. Yeah, he was young. I've got this kind of book of letters here. Let me see and it starts, volume 2 here starts with something here. They set off at once, death in their hearts, yet clinging outwardly to any semblance of a hope. They crossed to Lenci. They posted to Pisa. They went first to Casa Lanfranchi. Byron was there. He could tell them nothing. It was midnight, but to rest or wait was impossible. They posted on to Leghorn. They went about inquiring for Trelawney and Roberts. Not finding the right inn, they were forced to wait till next morning before prosecuting their search. They found Roberts. He only knew that Ariel had sailed on Monday. There had been a storm, and no more had been heard of her. Still, they did not utterly despair. Contrary winds might have driven the boat to Corsica or elsewhere, and information was perhaps withheld. So remorselessly, said Trelawney, are the quarantine laws enforced in Italy that, when at sea, if you render assistance to a vessel in distress or rescue a drowning stranger, on returning to port, you are condemned to a long and rigorous quarantine of 14 or more days. The consequence is, should one vessel see another in peril or even run it down by accident, she hastens on her course, and by general accord, not a word is said or reported on the subject.
Oh boy. Okay.
So Italy apparently had some weird laws about being quarantined. Probably has something to do with health reasons,
smallpox or whatever was going on then.
I don't know. Yeah, but Shelley's dead.
Right. Dang.
I mean, Percy didn't make it out alive, dude. And just like literally, it's big bopper energy.
Right. Right.
Like it's the music died. I think he was 30.
Okay.
He died in, let's see. 29. So he's almost in the 27 club. Like he's close enough to kind of, honorary.
Right.
Jeez. But of course, in this period, 29, he's like 53 in our years.
Right. Yeah. He spent the last several years, one side of Europe to the other, just,
right.
Crazy.
Babies. We don't know. Is it my baby? Maybe it's
Countless
my baby.
Babies.
Maybe it's a maybe baby.
It's a maybe baby. Yeah.
Is that a thing? Because now it is. It's a maybe baby.
Yeah, maybe baby.
Yeah. I know the one that's coming to mind.
No,
in our family. I'm
good.
I'm 100%. I'm 100 on that one.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's where that's the position you want to be in.
Yeah. We want to be in a lot of positions. We want to guarantee that. That's right. Yeah. It's real stork hours on Art of Darkness. All right. Yeah. Right. And her father kind of comes around, I've got this business about her writing career here. And he says of something she's written, it's the most wonderful work, and this is her father, to have been written at 20 years of age that I ever heard of. It must be about Frankenstein.
Yeah.
You are now 5 and 20, and most fortunately, you have pursued a course of reading and cultivated your mind in a manner the most admirably adapted to make you a great and successful author. If you cannot be independent, who should be? All right.
I love it.
Okay. So we're gonna come into the kind of the final stretch here. But I am going to cover the rest of her life briefly. After her husband's death, Mary Shelley lived for a year with Leigh Hunt and his family in Genoa, where she often saw Byron and transcribed his poems. She resolved to live by her pen and for her son, but her financial situation was precarious. That answers your question.
Yeah.
But this is still early days yet. On the 23rd of July, 1823, she left Genoa for England and stayed with her father and stepmother in the Strand until a small advance from her father-in-law enabled her to lodge nearby. Sir Timothy Shelley, Percy's father, had at first agreed to support his grandson, Percy Florence, only if he were handed over to an appointed guardian. Mary Shelley rejected this idea instantly. She managed instead to wring out of Sir Timothy a limited annual allowance, which she had to repay when Percy Florence inherited the estate. But to the end of his days, he refused to meet her in person and dealt with her only through lawyers. Mary Shelley busied herself with editing her husband's poems, among other literary endeavors, but concern for her son restricted her options. Sir Timothy threatened to stop the allowance if any biography of the poet were published. In 1826, Percy Florence became the legal heir of the Shelley estate after the death of his half-brother, Charles Shelley, his father's son by Harriet Shelley. Sir Timothy raised Mary's allowance from £100 a year to £250 a year, but remained as difficult as ever. Mary Shelley enjoyed the stimulating society of William Godwin's circle, but poverty prevented her from socializing as she wished. Oh boy, I've been there. She also felt ostracized by those who, like Sir Timothy, still disapproved of her relationship with Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Yeah, I give her a break at this point, for crying out loud.
Totally. Jeez. And you got this, you're raising the grandson of this wealthy dude, and he's being stingy because you've embarrassed him. And oh man. Yeah. Real
class. You can see a little bit. You can see a little bit why Percy's like, I don't want to be like you, man. You can see it. You can kind of understand it.
Totally. In the summer of 1824, Mary Shelley moved to Kentish Town in North London to be near Jane Williams. She may have been, in the words of her biographer Muriel Spark, a little in love with Jane. Okay, who knows? Jane later disillusioned her by gossiping that Percy had preferred her to Mary, owing to Mary's inadequacy as a wife. At around this time, Mary Shelley was working on her novel, The Last Man, and she assisted a series of friends who were writing memoirs of Byron and Percy Shelley, the beginnings of her attempt to immortalize her husband. She also met the American actor John Howard Payne and the American writer Washington Irving, who intrigued her. Payne fell in love with her and in 1826 asked her to marry him. She refused, saying that after being married to one genius, she could only marry another. Ouch. Damn. Yo,
that hurts.
let me down easy.
Yeah. I got a Wikipedia page. What do you want from me?
Yeah. You got a Wikipedia page because you proposed to me.
Well,
that's pretty funny. Yeah. No, but listen to this. The Last Man is an apocalyptic dystopian science fiction novel by Mary Shelley, first published in 1826. The narrative concerns Europe in the late 21st century, ravaged by the rise of a bubonic plague pandemic that rapidly sweeps across the entire globe, ultimately resulting in the near extinction of humanity. It also includes discussion of the British state as a republic, for which Shelley sat in meetings of the House of Commons to gain insight in the governmental system of the Romantic era. The novel includes many fictive allusions to her husband, Percy, who drowned in a shipwreck 4 years before the book's publication, as well as their close friend, Lord Byron, who had died 2 years previously. And I sort of blew by his death, Lord Byron. I really don't even know how he died. What happened? Yeah,
he died. He was in Greece. I'm not just going off memory. He was in Greece, involved in some kind of campaign.
I've got it right in front of me.
Okay.
They planned to attack the Turkish-held fortress of Lepanto. Byron employed a firemaster to prepare artillery, and he took part of the rebel army under his own command, despite his lack of military experience. Byron.
Yeah.
Before the expedition could sail, he fell ill, and bloodletting weakened him further. He made a partial recovery, but in early August, he caught a violent cold. The therapeutic bleeding insisted on by his doctors exacerbated it. He contracted a violent fever and died on the 19th of April. Okay, there you go. Okay. All right. Well, future Byron episode one day, maybe season 5, season 6. I don't know. Yeah. This is one of these episodes where we've put our pin in Mary Shelley. Maybe I should rephrase that.
Yeah.
We put our pin next to Mary Shelley.
Yeah.
She's there in all her dignity and genius. And you know what? We put our pin in Mary Shelley's monster, like a butterfly on a board. We got him.
Yeah.
And now we've got all her monsters.
Right.
And I feel like I've cracked open the door to this period. So if we want to do Percy, if we want to do Coleridge, if we want to do even Godwin, if we want to do Byron, we're right here. We're in it.
Indeed.
Aaron Burr, Patreon only banger coming in. I don't know, probably not Aaron Burr. All right, so moving on. That comeback. I can only marry another genius. Ouch. Yeah,
especially you tell that to a guy who's an actor, an artistic type. You know,
rough. Payne accepted the rejection and tried without success to talk his friend Irving into proposing himself. Okay, yeah. So let's see here. There's more. Let's see. In 1827, Mary was party to a scheme that enabled her friend Isabel Robinson and Isabel's lover, Mary Diana Dodds, who wrote under the name David Lindsay, to embark on a life together in France as husband and wife. With the help of Payne, whom she kept in the dark about the details, Mary Shelley obtained false passports for the couple. So there you go. There's a little episode.
Nice.
Mary Diana Dodds has a Wikipedia. She was a Scottish writer of books, stories, and other works, and she adopted a male identity. Most of her works appeared under the pseudonym David Lindsay. In private life, he used the name Walter Sholto Douglas. There you go. So we've got a little bit of gender bending.
Yeah.
Interesting. So they got to move to France. This is fascinating. Yeah, this is a whole rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah.
Later in life, Dodd suffered further attacks of liver disease. There is no clear evidence as to whether the relations between Dodd and Isabella were romantic. That is not impossible. It's called, why is this? Yeah. Well, there, he asked a friend to have a mustache and whiskers brought to him in the contemporary style. He ended up in debtor's prison. Interesting. Fascinating. Okay, well, there's a little rabbit hole we could go down.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Oh, boy. In 1828, she fell ill with smallpox while visiting them in Paris. She recovered unscarred, but without her youthful beauty. That'll wreck you.
Yeah.
So now, during the period between 1827 and 1840, she wrote the novels The Fortunes of Perkin Warbeck, Lador, and Faulkner, which is like, she was prolific too.
Yeah.
Warbeck is an 1830 historical novel about the life of Perkin Warbeck. The book takes a Yorkist point of view. I mean, these are like researched. Perkin Warbeck was a pretender to the English throne, claiming to be Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, and so on and so forth.
I always like pretenders to the throne stories. It's an interesting trope. Yeah.
Lador was also published under the title The Beautiful Widow. It's the penultimate novel that she wrote, and it is about power and responsibility within the family. The story follows the fortunes of the wife and daughter of Lord Lador, who was killed in a duel at the end of the first volume, leaving a trail of legal, financial, and familial obstacles for the two heroines to negotiate. Again, sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
And this was successful with the reviewers. Yep. And then Faulkner without a U. So it's just like our boy Faulkner. And
William Faulkner added the U.
Oh,
to
did
make
he?
It
well, there
sound
you go.
Fancier. So
yeah. And this is the plot. As a 6-year-old orphan, Elizabeth Raby prevents Rupert Faulkner from committing suicide. Faulkner then adopts her and brings her up to be a model of virtue. However, she falls in love with Gerald Neville, whose mother Faulkner had intentionally driven to her death years before. When Faulkner is finally acquitted of murdering Neville's mother, Elizabeth's female values subdue the destructive impulses of the two men she loves, who are reconciled and unite with Elizabeth in domestic harmony. Okay.
All
right. There you go. So just to give you an idea of her corpus, she contributed 5 volumes of lives of Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and French authors to Dionysius Lardner's Cabinet Cyclopedia. She also wrote. She's like a journeyman, like a working writer. She's like a real master writer.
Yeah.
She also wrote stories for ladies' magazines. She was still helping to support her father, and they looked out for publishers for each other. In 1830, she sold the copyright for a new edition of Frankenstein for £60 to Henry Colburn and Richard Bentley. It said 30 elsewhere, but in any case, for their new standard novel series. After her father's death in 1836 at the age of 80, he made it.
Yeah.
Somebody made it. It's all that good, clean. You know what it is?
Yeah.
He got it all off his chest.
Yeah, that's
when
right.
He had to write about.
Right.
He just had no filter.
Yeah,
God,
right.
he just let it all air out.
Yeah.
He just lifted the kilt,
yeah,
and just let it go.
Nothing can hurt you after that, right?
And live to 80 years old. Meanwhile, these babies, these toddlers, they got bad consciences.
Right.
They have, you just drop dead one day. No, it's so capricious and strange. One guy gets to live to 80, another you get a fever in Italy, you're dead. 3 years old, dead.
Right.
I mean, yeah. Even more then than now, you can paint the picture of the monster screaming at its creator, going, "Why?
Right.
What is this?" Yeah. In any case, she began assembling her father's letters and a memoir for publication. But after 2 years of work, she abandoned the project. I've got a note here about Frankenstein, page 407. Oh, that must be maybe something from here. Let me see. She also, kept the flame alive for Shelley.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. Well, this is fine. Yeah, this is sort of about the revisions and the changes that would happen to the novel. Let me see here. Elizabeth Lavenza, Victor's cousin in the original 1818 novel, becomes in 1831 an unconnected orphan whose marriage to him could cause no reader to disapprove. Reduced to a more passive role, she is in line with the sentimental heroines of the annals to which Mary had become an assiduous contributor. The Frankenstein family's involvement in Victor's career is ruthlessly pruned, emphasizing his solitude and absolving them from complicity. Victor's father in the first version had encouraged his interest in science and demonstrated the workings of electric power on a small machine of his own. In 1831, Victor's interest in science is stimulated by a stranger, while Waldman, his second tutor at Ingolstadt, is positioned more powerfully as an evil influence on Victor's ambitious, inquiring mind. Okay, I just wanted to read a little bit about that. These changes are not minor. It's not like line changes. She's rewriting the novel between 1818 and 1831. I don't know what consensus says is the best version or whatever, but I just thought it would be interesting to go right to the source and get the 1818 version.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And if you want to read more about sort of like almost a scholastic level reading of like, what are the differences? Miranda Seymour, her Mary Shelley biography. That's what I'm holding, and that's what I'm reading. Okay, almost there. Throughout this period, she also championed Percy Shelley's poetry, promoting its publication and quoting it in her writing. By 1837, Percy's works were well known and increasingly admired. In the summer of 1838, Edward Moxon, the publisher of Tennyson and the son-in-law of Charles Lamb, proposed publishing an edition of the collected works of Percy Shelley. Mary was paid £500 to edit the poetical works, which Sir Timothy insisted should not include a biography. Yeah, shut it down. Mary found a way to tell the story of Percy's life nonetheless. She included extensive biographical notes about the poems.
Clever. Very clever.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Nobody expects the footnotes. Very fun. Shelley continued to practice her mother's feminist principles by extending aid to women of whom society disapproved. For instance, Shelley extended financial aid to Mary Diana Dodds, a single mother and illegitimate herself, who appears to have been a lesbian, and gave her the new identity of Walter Sholto Douglas, husband of her lover Isabel Robinson. We talked about that a bit. Yeah. Shelley also assisted Georgiana Paul, a woman disallowed for by her husband for alleged adultery. Shelley, in her diary about her assistance to the latter, I do not make a boast. I do not say aloud, behold my generosity and greatness of mind, for in truth it is simple justice I perform, and so I am still reviled for being worldly. Mm-hmm. Mary Shelley continued to treat potential romantic partners with caution. In 1828, she met and flirted with the French writer Prosper Mérimée, but her one surviving letter to him appears to be a deflection of his declaration of love. She was delighted when her old friend from Italy, Edward Trelawney, returned to England, and they joked about marriage in their letters. Their friendship had altered, however, following her refusal to cooperate with his proposed biography of Percy Shelley, and he later reacted angrily to her omission of the aesthetic section of Queen Mab from Percy Shelley's poems. And Queen Mab is one of his early. It's an 1813 poem. In 9 cantos with 17 notes, and it's it's the first large poetic work that he wrote.
Okay.
Oblique references in her journals from the early 1830s until the 1840s suggested that Mary had feelings for the radical politician Aubrey Beauclerk, who may have disappointed her by twice marrying others. Oof.
Two
Oof.
times.
Oh, no, he married somebody else?
Yeah.
Again? You're like you're putting up smoke signals. You're putting up flares. Oh, it's very interesting. Yeah, if your heart sinks when you find out somebody has gotten married,
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's gonna last a long time.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away overnight, does it?
Nothing to do, and you don't do anything about it.
Yep.
You just
Nope.
swallow that down.
You don't send the fucking DM.
No. No.
I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for you. I know we haven't spoken since, but I'm so happy for you. You look so happy on Facebook. I'm almost convinced. I know you're not happy. These are just like a series of DMs.
Right.
You're getting a second
drunk.
bottle of wine. You can't be happy. You can't be happy.
With him?
With him? He isn't even on Facebook. All right, here we go. So she looked after Percy. That was her first concern. And she honored her late husband's wish that his son attend public school. And I think they mean private school. They mean private school. Public is private over there. Right?
Yeah.
You aware of that?
Yeah, I am. I never understood why, but I know that's the case.
I really don't know. With Sir Timothy's grudging help, had him educated at Harrow. To avoid boarding fees, she moved to Harrow on the Hill herself so that Percy could attend as a day scholar. Though Percy went on to Trinity College, Cambridge, and dabbled in politics and the law, he showed no signs of his parents' gifts. Well, hopefully his life wasn't as gnarly. Like, everybody doesn't have to be a world-spanning, century-spanning genius who's also troubled and deeply wounded.
Yeah. Could he just have like a reasonably content life that, with a career that contributes to society in some small way? Yeah.
All right. He also got into Cambridge. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's expected. If you're in Harrow, you go. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
That's a good school. Stephanie's over there right now. She's on a fellowship. Hey,
that's right.
There you go. Yeah. We're gonna be so delighted to have her come back on the pod. We really enjoy our little community of podcast people.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go. Final years. In 1840 and 1842. She and her son traveled on the continent, and she wrote about it, called Rambles in Germany and Italy in 1840, 1842, and 1843.
I really do like the fact. So her son would be what, like 20 or something by then?
Something like that.
I do like the fact that though she lost these children, she has this apparently really good relationship with her son. They're traveling, they're rambling, she's writing about it. Like, that's kind of nice.
Yeah. I'm gonna look here. So 4, including Sir Percy Shelley, 3rd Baronet, and he was born in 1819. So
then in his like early 20s. Yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
Yep, you can look him up. Yeah. I mean, he lived to be. This will maybe bring it closer to us. He only died in 1889.
Okay.
So it makes these people feel so far away, but once you can kind of almost bring them into the 20th century, it's like,
right.
I mean, and there's a picture of him, like a drawing of him on the Wikipedia where he's dressed. He could be in going to a dinner party in New York, what he's wearing.
Right.
I mean, it's not that far away. So yeah. In 1844, Sir Timothy Shelley finally died at the age of 90, falling from the stalk like an overblown flower, as Mary put it. For the first time, she and her son were financially independent, though the estate proved less valuable than they had hoped. Okay, so now they got a little money. So that answers your question. No, she's not, like, from this stuff, she's not making a living. Right? She's, or not making a great living.
Right.
Maybe she's making a living, but she's not financially independent. Let's just say that. Yeah. Okay. In the mid 1840s, she found herself the target of 3 separate blackmailers.
Oh, God.
In 1845, an Italian political exile called Gatteschi, whom she had met in Paris, threatened to publish letters she had sent him. A friend of her son bribed a police chief into seizing Gatteschi's papers, including the letters, which were then destroyed. Whoa. Shortly afterward, Mary Shelley bought some letters written by herself and Percy Bysshe Shelley from a man calling himself G. Byron and posing as the illegitimate son of the late Lord Byron. Also in 1845, Percy Shelley's cousin Thomas Medwin approached her, claiming to have written a damaging biography of Percy Shelley. He said he would suppress it in return for £250, but Mary Shelley refused. In 1848, Percy Florence married Jane Gibson St. John. The marriage proved that's great because every word in that name is the name of like a guitar brand.
Yeah, right.
It's Jane Gibson St. John.
Yeah.
St. John. Yeah, I'm playing my Jane bass. He's got his Gibson. He's on the St. John's.
Yeah.
The marriage proved a happy one, and Mary Shelley and Jane is a musical family. Yeah. And Mary Shelley and Jane were fond of each other. How many Janes have we met? Holy moly!
Everybody in this thing, everybody in this story is named Jane or Mary if they're female. Yeah.
Everybody's Mary or Jane or Claire or Clara. Mary lived with her son and daughter-in-law at Field Place, Sussex, and the Shelleys' ancestral home, and at Chester Square, London, and accompanied them on travels abroad. So they got money. Mary Shelley's last years. Go ahead.
No, I said nice. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
It's kind of a happy ending-ish.
Yeah, she's kind of getting it in. Yeah. Mary Shelley's last years were blighted by illness. From 1839, she suffered from headaches and bouts of paralysis in parts of her body, which sometimes prevented her from reading and writing. I know Mary Shelley suffered the tortures of the damned while alive, man.
Right.
And it doesn't surprise me that she wrote one of the all-time great banger stories about a monster. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. I just want to make sure I get everything. Years had passed.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Right. Years had passed since Mary had enjoyed more than a few weeks of continuous good health. Operations, homeopathy, long periods of rest, all remedies had failed to cure a mysterious and painful illness, which she imagined must be connected to her nervous and melancholy temperament. In the last cold weeks of 1850, confined to her bed at Chester Square and attended by a homeopathic doctor who, Percy irritably observed, did not do her the least good, she felt her left leg turning numb. Partial paralysis followed, but by the 3rd of January, her son felt hopeful enough to inform a worried Isabella Booth that their new doctors looked on the patient's chance of recovery very favorably. A week later, he wrote again to thank Mrs. Booth for offering to come and nurse his mother and to refuse since there is no danger now. Percy's optimism was short-lived. On the 23rd of January, Mary had a series of fits, after which she lapsed into a coma. The last and most astute of her physicians, Richard Bright, deduced that the paralysis had been caused by some form of brain damage. Her case was now recognized to be hopeless. The coma lasted for 8 days, during which no signs of suffering were apparent to her attendants. She died shortly after dusk on the 1st of February. Mary Ann Henry, the maid who had faithfully attended her for more than 10 years, was in the room to draw down the blinds and close the curtains. Percy and Jane were by the bed. Her sweet, gentle spirit passed away without even a sigh, Jane told Alexander Barry in one of the letters she wrote to give out the news. No medical records have survived, but the death certificate confirmed what Dr. Bright had already deduced from his patient's symptoms. Mary Shelley's illness stemmed from brain damage. A supposed tumor in the left cerebral hemisphere was noted to have been of long standing. And that's how she died. She died from a brain tumor at 53.
Yeah, it's young.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had some younger deaths in this story for sure, but she had a few more novels in her. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just winding down, bringing us into the landing strip before we take a break and then do the After Dark for Patreon. According to Jane, Shelley, Mary had asked to be buried with her mother and father, but Percy and Jane, judging the graveyard at St. Pancras to be dreadful, chose to bury her instead at St. Peter's Church, Bournemouth, near their new home at Boscombe. On the first anniversary of Mary Shelley's death, the Shelleys opened her box desk. Inside, they found locks of her dead children's hair, a notebook she had shared with Percy Bysshe Shelley, and a copy of his poem Adonai, with one page folded round a silk parcel containing some of his ashes and the remains of his heart.
Oh, man. Oof. They're romantics. Yeah. These people are romantics, man.
They're explicitly romantic people. And this is just an interesting little addendum. Days after Mary's death, Percy and Jane decided to exhume her parents' bodies. Mary, so Jane told Maud Brooke years later, had authorized the deed herself. I would like to rest at Bournemouth, near you, but I would like to have my father and my mother with me. Jane probably made this up. During the same conversation, she said that it would have broken my heart to let her loveliness wither in such a dreadful place. So they excavated her parents and moved them.
Wow.
And just something, just a little wild little story there at the end.
Yeah.
And that dovetails into what we're going to talk about a little bit on Patreon. We're going to talk about what ends up happening. There's a letter, what ends up happening to Shelley's heart. Here's what I've got for Patreon. Then I will ask you the closing question. But before I do, Brad, that's the life of Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, given the Art of Darkness treatment.
Yeah, nice job, Kevin. Yeah, quite a story. And Frankenstein, though it has never gone away, certainly should be further forward in the canon in some ways. It's relevant.
I think that it lives in a weird nebulous kind of zone where it's taken for granted. It's probably on everybody's Kindle. It's in the public domain. You can get a copy of it. It costs you nothing. It's taken for granted. I don't know. Do children read it in school? I was never assigned it in school. It's a little mature. It's a little mature for high school. It's a little like murdery,
right?
And stabby and violent. And and the cartoonish depiction of it in media gives a certain impression that's not accurate.
It's not quite indicative of the sophistication, the thematic sophistication that's going on. Yeah, interesting. Very good job, Kevin. Thank you so much.
What a lot of fun. All right, and we will take a break in a few minutes and come back for Patreon. Every episode we do After Darks. For the core episodes, we prepare some juicy stuff. When we have Darkroom After Darks, we do the same thing. We prepare little juicy tidbits. We have, we come back. Really seriously, consider supporting this podcast. The only way that this is going to be sustainable year over year over year is if we get a consistent, steady, supportive stream of Patreon support. Patreon.com/artofdarkpod. You get a ton of free stuff, a ton of free content over there. Brad dropped the first Patreon only core episode.
Hey.
So if you want an episode like this on the life of Dennis Johnson, you gotta get the Patreon. If you're one of these people who's like, no, I'm not downloading another app. I can't be bothered. I don't trust these companies or these people. That's fine. You can support us on using PayPal too. You go to artofdarkpod.com. There's a link. If you really liked the David Foster Wallace episode, you could send us some bucks and say, hey,
why not?
Thanks for doing the David Foster Wallace episode. Keep it coming. Every single new patron, every single little bit of money we get, it legitimately encourages us to continue doing this. And we have big dreams and big ambitions for this pod. We appreciate our listeners. Please keep sharing the pod. It doesn't cost anything. If you think somebody is probably going to be fascinated by the life of Mary Shelley, might be into the Frankenstein business, they're into horror stories, gothic stories, literary history, biographies, share it with somebody and, spread the word because this podcast is free by and large. The main body of the podcast is free and we love doing it. And we love hearing from people. It's reached a point where we're starting to get notes from people pretty much every day.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is super cool.
Yeah.
We hear from people all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of fun. If you want to get at us directly, there's the Telegram chat. It gets wild in there sometimes.
Yeah.
You can find it.
Hang on to your hats.
Hang on to your hats. T.me/Art of Dark Pod. We try to stay on topic in there. We try to talk about arts and creativity and the dark side of creativity and the subjects. And sometimes somebody will say, have you seen the pornographic picture of Marlon Brando? Here's a trigger warning. I'm posting a link to that. And we go, thank you for the trigger. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because maybe I don't need to see that right now. Right. It's cool that he shared that. It was very on topic. We did a Brando episode.
Yeah, it's historical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice just not to dump the picture right in the chat. And I appreciate our friends' sense of decorum. Yeah, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. You can also email us at artofdarkpod. So it's artofdarkpod@gmail.com. We're always taking requests for new subjects. Next year is planned, but Brad and I, we're agile. We'll pivot. We'll pivot. Yeah. Just like the tech bros, we'll pivot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been known to pivot.
Yeah, except we're not like defrauding anybody or anything.
Yeah, no, right. We're not pumping the stock and then dumping on retail. Not yet. Not yet. Eventually. No, but for real. Let me tease the After Dark. Here's what we got. So when we come back for the Patreon listeners, I'm going to talk about Godwin getting phrenology done on Mary.
Cool.
After mom dies, and read my daughter's bones and tell me what she's going to be like. Okay, that's fun. It's a lost art, phrenology. They're not. Right. It's not so. Phrenology would be considered déclassé now, would it not?
I would think so. I mean, you said a lost art, and it's in some ways kind of good riddance, but it's an interesting, like, cultural historical oddity, right? Like, I remember we used to read the shape of people's skulls. Yeah,
yeah. Well, it's nice because you're like the phrenology cliff notes for yourself.
Yeah,
with your shaved head.
Yeah, people could do it to me. People could give me a phrenological reading just like over Zoom.
I'm drawing green lines all over your head in my mind right now. Bro, you can't even rotate Brad Kelly's head in your mind.
It just looks like a kind of a vague gray splotch. Yeah.
He went to public schools. Private schools. Something. We're going to talk about when this Aldini fellow tried to reanimate the corpse of a hanged man, or like at least shot electricity through him to see what would happen. Fun. Which I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, hang on, my Zoom just got embiggened. That's the technical term.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do the Prometheus poem from Byron. Then we're going to read this essay from the end of the Frankenstein edition that I have, and we're going to tell that little story about burying Shelley's heart. Okay. Brad, what would Mary Shelley in her prime be doing today?
Yeah,
if she was still alive.
I think she keeps. She took this thing. She had this moment after Shelley died, after Percy died, where it was like, well, I'm just going to take care of my son, and I'm going to make a living as a writer. And so I think she would have kept doing that. I was very interested to see that she had some stuff that was The Last Man, that's sort of in this, not science fiction, it's sort of science fiction, right? This sort of speculative fiction anyway, but then also some very much more conventional stories, like her final novel, Faulkner. It very much sounded like a current day upmarket literary premise. So who knows? It's hard to say like what direction she would have taken, but I certainly think she would have been, putting a novel out every few years in perpetuity, possibly revising Frankenstein up until the end.
Can you imagine if she had lived to see Frankenstein put on film?
That'd be wild, right?
Her mind would have and she probably, I wonder how upset she'd be. Didn't they do a version where De Niro plays the monster?
It did, yeah. It did try to, that one I think did try to hew more closely to the novel. In appearance, like it was, you don't really see him that much, but like when you do, it's much closer to what the descriptions are in Shelley's work. So
I'll just never believe that Robert De Niro is 8 feet tall.
No.
I know too much.
Right. Yeah.
We'll be back on the After Dark, patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod.